But within the Soviet space program, cosmonauts insist that they have seen more than just floating scraps of space junk.
I think that we are not alone in the universe. I believe that someone or something of extraterrestrial origin has visited Earth.
In April of 1979, cosmonaut Viktor Afanasyev lifted off from Star City to dock with the Soviet Soyuz 6 space station. But while en route, something strange happened. Cosmonaut Afanasyev saw an unidentified object turn toward his craft and begin tailing it through space.
It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long with inner holes. The object was narrow here and wider here, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away.
In addition to photographing the UFO, Afanasyev continually reported back to Mission Control about the craft's size, its shape and position. When the cosmonaut returned to Earth, he was debriefed, told never to reveal what he knew, and had his cameras and film confiscated. Those photos and his voice transmissions from space have never been released. It is only now, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that Afanasyev feels he can safely tell his story.
It is still classified as a UFO because we have yet to identify the object.
A man with more than 20 years flying experience under his wing, so to speak, saw something extraordinary which later made those headlines as he flew at 4,000 feet near Guernsey. And so did quite a few of his passengers, and so did the pilot of another aircraft that was flying nearby, flying over Sark. And Captain Bowyer is here now to tell his story. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for speaking up, because I know from private conversations I've had over the years with the commercial pilots, sometimes when I'm up in the cockpit with them, they do see things, and they tend not to report them because they don't want to be laughed at or have their careers jeopardised.
Exactly right,
so why have you decided to speak out about this?
Well, I didn't actually decide to speak out at all. Actually, the press asked the company, which I work for, would I mind doing an interview, and the company, being quite a forward-thinking firm, had no objection. In fact, pretty much actively encouraged it. So that's how it happened, really.
Well, how did the press get hold of it then? Did passengers?
I don't know. I really don't know.
You weren't the only person who saw
No,
this phenomenon,
that's right.
were you? There
No.
were some passengers who saw it, and
Yeah.
also another pilot.
Yes.
Simultaneously. Well, look, we've got an artist's impression that we knocked up here this afternoon on our computer paint box. Is that kind of what you saw? Is that a reasonable...
No.
Oh, well, it's the best we did.
Oh, be honest, yeah.
Well, hold that picture.
Well, it's pretty good.
You describe it to us.
Well, it was a brilliant yellow object. The brightness you've got there, about two-thirds from left to right, it was a graphite grey section, if you want to call it a fuselage. We don't know yet what it was. We're looking into it.
And how big was it?
Difficult to say once again, but I saw it from 50 miles away. So any object from 50 miles away must have been fairly enormous.
What, about a mile long?
It's possible, yeah.
Did it move at all?
It probably didn't move, but I had the great opportunity the other day from Jersey Air Traffic Control visiting their radar room, and some interesting traces, let's put it that way, from the radar
Really?
indicate that there's a possibility that they did pick up from both Guernsey and Jersey radar traces, spurious traces they call, for around about 55 minutes.
How long did you see it for?
I saw it in total for 12 minutes.
Can I show you a picture? This is, I'm sure you've seen this picture. It's of lenticular clouds, a very rare but known formation. This was taken some years ago. Could it have been something like that? Could it have been some very, very strangely formed cloud, do you think?
No. Well, I think highly unlikely. I've seen lots of lenticularis in my time, but just doesn't look like a cloud.
Well, you've seen a lot of clouds over the last
I also had
years.
the opportunity of looking at these objects, there were two of them, through binoculars, 10 times magnification, and in my view, a very definite object inside controlled airspace, which shouldn't have been there.
What happened? Did you simply lose contact with it? Did it disappear?
Well, I was landing. It was a general flight from Southampton going to Alderney, and the only reason I lost sight of it was because I descended through a haze layer, which is fairly common in that area, and having descended through the haze layer, couldn't see it anymore. But it's almost certainly still there.
Did the other pilot who was flying over Sark, the island of Sark, did he report it in exactly the same terms?
Yes, because it was sighted, or they were sighted in inside controlled airspace. The pilot's under a legal obligation, and I suspect this is where the press
stories come from.
And he's filed a report exactly the same as I have.
Well, let's show you a couple of pictures from the UFO file books. These are genuine UFOs in the sense that no one's ever been able to explain what they are, but they happen. They're not fakes.
Well, that's
over New Mexico.
That's very similar to the sort of thing that I saw. Yeah,
well,
and my passengers.
That was famously
I haven't seen
taken over New Mexico in 1957, and it's not a cloud. That much we do know. I don't know what it is, but it's not a cloud.
Not a cloud. Analysis showed that it wasn't a cloud, but they don't know what it was, hence UFO. This is one from Russia in 1989. Again, analysis shows it's a genuine object. It's not a cloud. There is a cloud above it, a faint one, but that object is not a cloud. Again, is that something?
Well, I'd say the object I saw was a very brilliant yellow
much brighter
colour.
than that.
Yeah, much brighter. It's emitting light.
Good. It was emitting. You think it was emitting light?
Well, there was cloud above it and all the way down to Guernsey. And,
so it couldn't have been reflecting sunlight then?
Yeah.
Well, that was what I first thought before I looked at it through the binoculars. That there's a lot of vineries called greenhouses in Guernsey, and the sun may have been reflecting from one of these vineries to the aircraft. You often see them in France as well on the way down to the Channel Islands, and because the aircraft moves position and the reflections are fixed in place, they often disappear. They always disappear. This one didn't disappear; it just stayed stationary.
If you had to take an instinctive guess, and I'm saying it's guess, so I'm not asking for professionals, because how could you possibly know? Would you say that it was something of this planet or something from outer space?
Extremely difficult. I mean, I think a few years ago you interviewed Dr. David Clark on a very similar sort of thing.
He did, yeah.
About 4 years ago. I spoke to him today. He's in charge of a team that's looking into this at the moment. I have been asked a question by the press, and my simple answer was, I don't think it's from around here. I can't speculate any further than that. But there is some information which is now being looked at, and hopefully better come back one day and give you an answer to this. But at the moment, it's an unknown.
When you fly now, I mean, do you have a sort of slightly heightened awareness of what may be going on around you?
I think, yes, definitely. Yeah, it's not the first object I've seen personally, and I've spoken to a lot of other commercial pilots since this has happened, and they've said on the quiet, come round the corner, I want to tell you about what I saw.
Absolutely,
and I think what's going to happen now, this may have opened the can, and I think what all professional pilots out there ought to be looking at is actually reporting everything they see and actually getting it itemised and written into the CAA, and then perhaps we will find.
Well, I have to say the unofficial first-hand accounts I've, as I say, had from professional pilots, many of them with as much experience as you have, and they're not putting me on, are extraordinary. Some things that some guys have seen. Some see nothing in their entire career. We interviewed a British Airways pilot who also came out in the 1960s. He saw a silver disc, didn't he? He picked it up on his radar. It was picked up on ground radar over the Bay of Biscay. Pretty big, and it travelled at immense speed, way faster than the speed of sound, and disappeared under his right wing. And it was a round silver disc, like they're supposed to be. Extraordinary.
Well, this object looked like a CD disc on edge, if you like, but very sharp and extremely well defined.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and describing it to us. That's fascinating. Thank you.
And Clark McClellan will start things off tonight. For those of you who've been listening for some time, Clark has a fascinating background. He has served this country as a patriot, as a scientist with the Space Shuttle program. His book and website are called the Stargate Chronicles. It has to do with astronauts seeing things, having experiences that they don't normally talk about. Clark, with his background working in the shuttle program at a very high level, got to know these people and heard things and saw things and experienced things by talking and interacting with staff and astronauts and other scientists that he has decided to put them in a book.
Okay, I'm going to come on tonight with the fifth moon mission that landed on the moon. Well, the fifth moon mission, but the fourth that landed there. 13, of course, went out around and came back, and I call that our most successful Apollo mission to the moon because we saved 3 lives.
Right.
This is about my friend, NASA astronaut and first NASCAR lunar rover car driver on the moon.
Okay.
He saw UFOs above the moon, and he saw crystal buildings. So we can get to that now.
Now that's an obvious story that I've heard about, we've talked about in the past, and there have been representations of this story on the internet. But I can't wait to hear what you have to say about it. But go right ahead with this. This is very good.
He flew on Apollo 15 with Dave Scott and Al Warden. It was James Irwin, my friend from Pittsburgh. We were both born in the same city.
Uh-huh.
And he flew there, and let me say what we can get to now. He formed, when he came back, the High Flight Foundation in Colorado Springs, and then I met him again at the Philadelphia airport by sheer accident. Yeah. Well, he said, Clark, I know what you want to talk about, your favorite subject, UFOs. And we both smiled. I said, yes. He said, Clark, I can say certain things, but there are things I cannot because we were all hushed up about our mission by NASA and the DOD to shut up and not talk about things or lose their retirement, or maybe worse.
Was he afraid? Was he simply under national security and NASA stricture?
Well, he had already retired, Jeff, and he had fears. He had fears because there were threats of discontinuing their health benefits, their retirement, like happened to me.
Same thing.
He said, I can't chance that, Clark, with my family. And I said, I understand that, Jim. I said, I will never say a thing about this unless you or I die. Of course, if I died, I couldn't say anything.
That would be a tough trick.
Yeah, he knew what I meant.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, he knew I was nightcap director at the Kennedy Space Center, National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And he said, okay, UFOs, Clark. I said, what do you want to know? He said, what do you want to know, my good friend? So I asked him, I heard an uplink, up and down link from a commentary while the Launch Control Center, at the Launch Control Center at Kennedy Space Center, Pad 39, and David Scott or somebody was indicating that they were seeing unknown objects overhead. And Jim said, that's true. He verified that. He said that the unknown objects were very swift and they were very tiny. I said, tiny? He said, yeah, maybe about a foot or two long. I said, my God, that sounds like Gulliver's Travels. He said, well, God makes creatures in every way and shape and form. And I said, amen.
Wow.
My name is Henry McElroy, Jr., a retiring former state representative from New Hampshire. Thank you for your attention to this brief message concerning the world's interaction with both Earth-based and off-world astronauts. The reason I am making this announcement is in the hopes of encouraging better perspective to all who explore the universe. I would like to submit to our nation my personal testimony of one document related to one of these ongoing topics, which I saw while in office serving on the State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs Committee. The document I saw was an official brief to President Eisenhower. To the best of my memory, this brief was pervaded with a sense of hope, and it informed President Eisenhower of the continued presence of extraterrestrial beings here in the United States of America. The brief seemed to indicate that a meeting between the President and some of these visitors could be arranged as appropriate if desired. The tone of the brief indicated to me that there was no need for concern, since these visitors were in no way causing any harm or had any intention whatsoever of causing any disruption then or in the future. While I can't verify the times or places or that any meeting or meetings occurred directly between Eisenhower and these visitors, because of his optimism in his farewell address in 1961, I personally believe that Eisenhower did indeed meet with these extraterrestrial off-world astronauts.